I just want to share my gratitude and respect for living and working on the lands here in North Vancouver of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples. The Alzheimer Society of B.C. operates on traditional unceded territories of Indigenous people across the province. None of our work and our mission will be achievable until people are able to access resources that are culturally specific, that are free from barriers, including Indigenous specific racism. So all people who are affected by dementia feel welcomed, included, and respected. Today's presentation is talking about a diagnosis of dementia. We will discuss the impact of receiving a diagnosis of dementia. So this session is for anyone affected by dementia, whether you're living with it yourself or supporting someone who is. The material we're going to present is honest and upfront about responding to a diagnosis and about accessing support. There may be people here today who've been recently diagnosed or in the process of being diagnosed, and this can be a really sensitive and emotional time. So I particularly ask everyone to keep your fellow participants in mind and use some due consideration and respect when asking any questions or commenting. Just keep in mind that we have a mixed audience always on our webinars. Some of the information might not be applicable to your current situation, but it might become relevant in the future. As always, if you feel that it doesn't answer the questions you have, you can always follow up with the FirstLink Dementia Helpline. The number is in the chat box. We are going to be sharing it a number of times as the webinar progresses as well. So I shared here today, I got you started in the chat, and I think I can see some people commenting there already. I would love to hear what you came here to learn today. Feel free to pop that in the chat box. And as we go through this together over the next hour, I'm going to try and get through as many questions as possible. But if I don't have time for those, I'm going to make sure we have some links for where to go next and a follow-up for the FirstLink Dementia Helpline. Michael, I don't know if you want to pop off mute. Is there anything there in the chat box that people are sharing they're hoping I'm going to cover today?
I do see a comment from Richard. I think he might, I'm not sure if this was in response or he might have said this a little earlier, but he said, so my husband was just diagnosed with Alzheimer's and this is all really new. First steps, a blank step slate here. I'd like to know, what should I be doing?
A great question and a really big question. So I think today will probably help with that. And I think for anyone, I'm sure there are other people in similar situations feeling like, oh, gosh, I don't know, where do I even start here? So by being here today, thank you. This is a really good starting point. And let's make good use of our hour together. Was there anything else there in the chat?
Yeah, a few more. People responding to the prompt now. Patty says, my sister's dementia is progressing. And Alicia has written, I work within the healthcare system, IH, and come across many elders that may have been diagnosed or is showing symptoms. And I am just looking to gain more information for myself and be able to share this information with the loved ones.
Great. So some folks here who are caring for their family members or their friends or even in the health authority, how to support other people. So sounds like
Uh,
there's oh, go ahead.
yeah, just one last one from Angela here. Need to know how to support my elderly mom who is trying to adapt and support him. She is 83, dad 85, and she is very angry and upset with what she has to deal with.
Okay. Yeah, it sounds like there's some real changes that come alongside a diagnosis or before a diagnosis that can bring up a lot of emotions. And I think that's something that I'm going to make sure I talk about today, the emotional impact of a diagnosis, not just the what literally happens with the diagnosis. So I think that aligns pretty well with what I have planned. I'm going to have do a little run through here. As you can probably see, we're planning to cover a few things that we mentioned there in the chat. The rest I will try my best to hold on to. Michael will be my accountability buddy and remind me if I don't cover any topics that get mentioned in the chat. I'm going to be talking about the process of getting a diagnosis, what it looks like, and then how you might feel in the wake of a diagnosis. I'm going to touch on how to start building a support network. If you're at that point where you're feeling like, gosh, I don't even know. What do I need to know? This just starts to touch on some of those aspects. And we also look at the idea of independence and interdependence and how we rely on others in our lives. Now is also the time to start to look at personal planning. So I'll briefly introduce that topic. And lastly, we're going to talk about some of the resources that we have at the Alzheimer Society of B.C. Um, we have in the chat a helpful resources handout. I'm sure Michael has already popped it in there, but he's going to keep popping it in throughout our session today. That goes through a whole heap of information that backs up what I'm going through today, and a lot of really practical little worksheets, tools, tips that can help you along this journey as you're navigating this diagnosis process. So let's get right into it. Getting a diagnosis of dementia is a process of ruling things out. There is no single test to diagnose dementia. One of the first steps is often ruling out that a person may be experiencing something called delirium. This can be done through a physical exam and lab tests, and it's one of the first steps because what they're trying to check is that while delirium and dementia are really similar, they're not actually the same thing. So before we even get into what is dementia, I want to talk about something else, delirium. Delirium occurs when symptoms of mental decline or confusion appear really suddenly and rapidly, typically over the course of hours or days. And it's usually caused by medical conditions such as those listed on the left-hand side of the screen. For example, drug interactions, infection, fever, urinary tract infection is a really common one there. One of the main differences between dementia and delirium is that delirium is reversible and dementia is not. So that when someone is seeming confused and we treat that, the underlying cause of delirium is treated, for example, the urinary tract infection, those symptoms will dissipate and their mental abilities often improve just to the way that they were before. Dementia, on the other hand, cannot be reversed. Once we rule out the diseases such as those the symptoms listed on the left-hand side, the diseases that are there on the right-hand side, they have actually caused damage to brain cells and neural pathways so that that damage can't be repaired with a medication or with a antibiotic, for example. So that's one of the reasons why it's important to pursue a diagnosis as early as possible, to rule out that there's not some physical cause and that there isn't delirium present for the person. If it is indeed delirium and not dementia, the sooner the person receives treatment, the better. It's also important to note that people living with dementia can develop delirium caused by the same medical conditions as those listed on the left. For example, someone living with dementia can get a urinary tract infection and suddenly decline or seem a lot more confused, or their symptoms worsen. That might mean that they're experiencing delirium and should see a doctor right away. It's really important that for anyone, we don't overlook sudden changes as there may be an underlying cause that can be treated. The individual may have difficulty communicating that something isn't right, like they're in pain or they're dehydrated. So we try and pay attention to changes in behavior and nonverbal communication that might be suggesting that something is off. As we mentioned before, the process of getting a diagnosis is certainly not a single test, and I'm sure many of you have been through or currently going through that process. It often has several components, including a review of your medical history, which can reveal risk factors for dementia, such as cardiovascular disease, diabetes, hypertension. It may include a cognitive exam, an MMSE or a MOCA, MOCA. It's typically scored out of 30. The doctor will often ask you questions like, can you draw a clock? Name 3 words starting with the letter F. And that's designed to test certain areas of a person's cognitive functioning, such as orientation to space, time, attention, recall, and language. Based on those results, further testing might be ordered, such as a CT or an MRI scan, to see if there's physical evidence of strokes or atrophy or brain changes. But not everyone does a CT scan or a MRI scan. As you can imagine, going through this process can take time. It might take several appointments and months before you receive a diagnosis. You may be referred to a specialist for further testing and follow up. Once your doctor has a combination of those test results, along with your detailed medical history, they may have the evidence needed to give you an official diagnosis, but not always. Not everyone receives a specific diagnosis, such as Alzheimer's disease or vascular dementia. Sometimes the diagnosis is simply dementia or major neurocognitive disorder. That's a term that doctors are using more often. This is one reason why it's important to continue seeing your doctor or your specialist on an ongoing basis. Over time, your diagnosis may be updated or could possibly change, and they can also help determine if there is progression taking place and at what pace. You may wish to clarify who you will be seeing for follow-up appointments and whether it's your GP or whether you'll continue seeing a specialist or another healthcare provider. There is a lot more information on receiving a diagnosis on our website. And we've also included a link to our Getting a Diagnosis toolkit, which is in that helpful resources handout. As you may have heard already, dementia is called an umbrella term. I've mentioned the word dementia many times in this, but I haven't explained it yet. So let's get into it together. It's called an umbrella term because it encompasses many different diseases that cause the symptoms of dementia. There is at present no definitive test for most dementias. It's usually a process of elimination, like we went through in the past. A diagnosis of dementia requires there to be significant changes in memory, plus at least one other cognitive domain. For example, changes in language, judgment, thinking, orientation, perception, decision making, behavior changes. That's a long list. But what the doctors are looking for is that those changes are significant enough to cause impairment to the individual's daily functioning, and it's not caused by some underlying medical condition like delirium or an infection or a psychiatric disorder. If we look at the different types of dementia, Alzheimer's disease is one of the oldest identified types of dementia. That's why we're called the Alzheimer Society. There are plaques caused by abnormal deposits of amyloid protein and tangles caused by tau protein, and these destroy brain cells, causing thinking, ability, and memory to deteriorate. When brain cells degenerate and die, the brain shrinks, known as atrophy. Alzheimer's disease impacts much more than just memory, but short-term memory loss is usually one of the first symptoms associated with this type of dementia. Vascular dementia, also called multi-infarct dementia, occurs when the cells in the brain are deprived of oxygen. There's a network of blood vessels called the vascular system that supplies the brain with oxygen. If there's a blockage in the vascular system, or if it's diseased, blood is prevented from reaching the brain. And as a result, brain cells die, leading to the symptoms of dementia. Mixed dementia occurs when there is evidence that there's more than one form of dementia present in the brain. The most common example is when Alzheimer's disease and vascular dementia occur at the same time. Researchers don't know exactly how many people are currently diagnosed with the specific type of dementia actually might have mixed dementia, but we think that the condition is significantly more common than we previously realized. As we look through to some other types of dementia, dementia with Lewy bodies is a form of dementia that occurs because of abnormal deposits of a protein inside the brain's nerve cells. These deposits are called Lewy bodies, after the scientist who first described them. The deposits interrupt the brain's messages. It usually affects areas of the brain that involve thinking and movement. If cognitive symptoms appear at the same time or at least a year before movement problems, the diagnosis is dementia with Lewy bodies. If there are some movement problems first and dementia symptoms develop later, the diagnosis is Parkinson's disease dementia. There is also frontal temporal dementia, which is a term for a group of disorders. Frontal temporal dementia usually affects the frontal and temporal lobes of the brain, the areas generally associated with personality, behavior, and language. And finally, people may just get a diagnosis of dementia. There may not be a specific diagnosis of one of the diseases that we mentioned. Sometimes doctors just diagnose a person with dementia because they are showing signs of memory loss and other changes to cognition that are impairing their ability to function. But they don't know what specific type of disease is causing those symptoms. In some cases, a person with dementia might refuse further examination and testing. And in others, the doctor might be fairly confident that further testing wouldn't significantly alter the course of treatment. For these individuals, they have one of those underlying diseases, but they may never find out which exact one. If a person living with dementia or their families want more information regarding the diagnosis, they can be referred to a specialist, such as a geriatrician, neurologist, psychiatrist, or a geriatric psychiatrist, or they may already be working with one throughout the diagnosis process. As we look at all of these different types of dementia, no matter what the disease is, what every person under that umbrella has in common is that they have dementia. So that's why I'm using that language today rather than just Alzheimer's disease. As we look to past the kind of the medical part of things and start to look into how we react to a diagnosis, receiving a diagnosis of dementia can be frightening, and each person will likely react differently. I want to talk a little bit about some of the emotions that may come up from a diagnosis. But before I jump into that, Michael, is there anything in the chat that I need to answer there related to some of the information I blasted through on the last few slides?
No, I saw a question there, but I think it's a little older than or
Okay,
from before
I'll
that.
I'll maybe save that one for later then. And as we go into looking at some of the emotional processes that we go through when we get a diagnosis of dementia. There's one model that links us to 5 emotional phases that many people experience when they react to hard or painful news, such as a diagnosis of dementia. These emotions can be experienced and re-experienced in any order. There's a big swirl of emotions, and there's no time limits to how long you might stay in each emotional state. Let's pull this up on the screen and have a little look at some of these emotions here. I'd love to hear in the chat as you see this, how it resonates with you, and if there's any of these emotions really stand out for how you felt when you first got that diagnosis. There's 5 different emotional phases here on the screen: sadness and despondency, shock and numbness, disbelief and denial, acceptance, anger and frustration. These are all kind of scattered throughout the screen because there's not a particular order in which anyone might feel these emotions. You might not feel all of them. You might only feel one or two or a few of them. You might feel like you've processed things and gone to a stage of acceptance, and then something happens and you swirl right back into a feeling of anger or frustration. As we look through that feeling of shock and numbness, a diagnosis of dementia can come as a real shock, even if you've expected it, even if you have been pushing for a diagnosis. That feeling of this can't be happening to me, or it's not as bad as the doctor says, in the beginning, denial can actually be a positive, even protective force. We use denial to shield us from the painful news while we adjust to a new reality. A degree of denial is actually essential. It's like drinking a really hot coffee. We sip the condition of our truth, the truth of our condition, really carefully and gently as we get used to it. But sometimes we don't feel like we've gotten used to it at all. We might feel angry and frustrated about the diagnosis. People might be angry at themselves or at others. However, some people also experience a sense of relief to find that there's a medical reason behind the changes, that they've noticed their thinking and their actions are tied to something that they can now name. Most people will go through periods of feeling helpless and powerless and sad in the face of the implications of the diagnosis. You're confronting your own limitations, feeling sad when considering the losses that the disease has caused and may cause as time goes on. And maybe you're also feeling worried and fearful about what will happen next. There's that word acceptance there in the middle. It doesn't mean that you are happy about the situation to be accepting. With acceptance, it's maybe more referring to accepting the problem rather than avoiding it, realizing that the situation must be adjusted to rather than actively changed. Acceptance will involve recognizing and becoming reconciled to the limits of the body. To reiterate, though, there is no right or wrong way to react to a diagnosis. And if you're sitting there thinking, hang on, I haven't felt any of these emotions, this doesn't resonate with me, these are just some words on the screen. Your experience and navigating through these emotions is going to be very unique to you, to your family, and to your situation. There is no right way or wrong way to react to a diagnosis and no set timeline to follow. Try to be kind to yourself as you work through your emotions. Even as we look at these on the screen, I can see that there's a few comments there in the chat, and I just recognize that I'm sure a few people are feeling emotions and looking back to the past as they reflect on this. It takes time to process a diagnosis. And it even takes more time to consider what that diagnosis means in your life and how it might impact your family and your friends. There are so many questions and unknowns. How quickly will the disease progress? What symptoms should I expect? You may struggle with who to share your diagnosis with. Ultimately, that decision is a personal one. But there can be many benefits to letting those closest to you know what is going on. Often they already suspect something is happening, but they don't know what to do or how to say it or how to offer support. Learning about dementia and maintaining open communication can strengthen your relationship. You may want to let those closest to you know and to let them know who you are as a person and that the things that are important to you are not going to change as this disease moves on. It can be frightening for the person receiving the diagnosis. Given the choice, no one would choose to live with a brain disease. And although dementia starts small, we know it is also progressive. The symptoms will increase over time and will eventually need some support from those around us. Throughout your dementia journey, you will need to consider something we call interdependence, which means we move to really looking at how we value cooperation, collaboration, and teamwork. It is possible to live well with dementia when we are surrounded by understanding and support. Let's look at the concepts of independence and interdependence a little closer on the next slide. In our society, independence is often seen as a value and a goal, and so we fear losing it. Just think about how we drive cars and how important driving a car is for so many people, being independent. But few people are completely independent. We rely on others every day. Think about driving a car. You didn't pave the road that you drove somewhere on. You didn't fill the pothole yourself. You didn't even, or maybe you changed the tires on your car. I sure didn't. Maybe you have someone else check the oil because that's something that they're a specialist in. We rely on others every day. Interdependence has always been present and will continue to be throughout our lives. Whether living with dementia or caring for someone with dementia, a diagnosis presents an opportunity to embrace that interdependence, I'm going to say it right, with others. And while a person with dementia will lean on others more and more as their disease progresses, it's also vital for their care partner to lean on others too. The dementia journey is not a sprint or even a marathon. It's like a team endurance event that is most successful when you build a strong support network around yourselves. That includes both informal and formal support, which we will look at in more detail on the next few slides. Before we move on, I'd love to ask in the chat box um, whether, just give me a quick yes or no. Do you like to help other people? Are you the sort of person who enjoys, like, yep, I get a lot out of helping other people? And I wonder, just reflect in your own head here, when you help others, does it make you feel good? Give me a chance to get a drink of water while you answer there. Now, here's the tricky bit. I'd like you to reflect and maybe answer honestly in the chat box if you can. Do you like asking others for help? Hmm. Oh no, I can see the chat box there. It was a sea of yeses, and then all of a sudden it's a sea of no's. Or not really. I'm not really sure. You are not alone, clearly, if you find asking for help difficult. But look at your own answer, or all those other people who said yes, they like to help others. This can kind of shift our mindset around to perceiving ourselves. I think we often perceive ourselves as a burden to others when we seek support. And in fact, we need to start the process of shifting that mindset. Let's have a little look at how we can shift into getting help for ourselves, accepting some more help, and accepting our interdependence. The nature of the dementia journey and life itself means that people cannot go through this journey alone. It's simply not possible. Find people you're comfortable with to share your feelings and emotions. This might be the first way you reach out for help on this journey. It might be someone in your family, a good friend, members of the support group at the Alzheimer Society, or maybe just having a chat to us on the phone at the First Link Dementia Helpline. The important thing is to find an outlet when you can express your feelings. These people form your informal support network. We can all benefit from having an informal support network in place, whether we are living with dementia or not. Both caregivers and people with dementia can become isolated and lonely as this disease progresses. So it's really important to stay connected to the people around you and think of ways that you can re engage with them and ask them for help. Sometimes people do want to help, but they just don't know how. They might be afraid to offend you or say the wrong thing. You've probably already noticed how much misunderstanding there is about dementia. People honestly just do not know how to help. So you can try and be really clear about the type of help you need and how often you need it. That means being specific. We often suggest start with a list of tasks that others could do and let them choose the tasks that they wish to take on. You can create that task list with small stuff and big stuff, like taking the bins out on the Monday when it's garbage night so you don't forget again, like me last week. Uh, We all have these little things that make up part of our day and part of our lives. And if we can take any of that little bit of burden out, that can be really helpful. And as I go through this, I would love to hear in the chat if anyone has asked someone for help with something like that. Asking a neighbor to mow the lawn or to take out the bins, or asking a family member to make sure they call up and speak to the person with dementia once a week. I'd love to hear in the chat, has anyone engaged some of those informal supports in that way? It's not that you're delegating jobs because you can't do them. I'm sure you absolutely could do them, but you are building a team to share those responsibilities and importantly, maintain your health. Doing this can be a gift in so many ways to those who wanted to help but just didn't know what to do. In our helpful resources handout is a asking for help worksheet. That's a lot of helps there. The asking for help worksheet goes through a bit of a template for how to create that list. Michael, is there any suggestions there in the chat of how people, what people have engaged or what people have asked others to do for help?
Yeah, we see some people sharing. Amy said, "What I've experienced is when I share informally, there are many things that have the same experience or challenges or have gone through it."
Mm.
And Andrea shares, "My mom's neighbor slash friend takes her to the gym 3 times a week."
I love that. That's a really great thing where you're asking someone else to kind of carry the mental load of remembering and picking up, but it's also an enjoyable thing that they do together.
And three more here. One from Coco says, "We've welcomed people who know mom to visit her in the hospital or call her
Mm,
over social media. We've also cued them in how to speak to her and also to go along with whatever she says rather than correct her."
mm, great.
Similarly, Matt says, "My mom's friends drop by regularly, several times per week."
Mm,
Um, John mentions, "I don't like asking people for help, though. I have been independent in the past."
yeah. Yeah, I recognize that feeling, that real challenge of having to look at your place in the world and how you've interacted with the world and how all of a sudden actually maybe that's changing because of a diagnosis and having to ask for help is not a habit that your brain and your body is used to. Hopefully a lot of the work that we do at the Alzheimer Society shows how your brain is flexible and how your brain changes. And it's almost like as caregivers, we have to take that same approach. I recognize that there was someone there. I can see this comment here, Michael, about someone struggling that their mum might not feel comfortable sharing the diagnosis, so you don't know how to ask for help. And that's a really important one, and I want to touch on that briefly. The person with dementia may not be able to say, yes, I need help, or they may not understand that they have a diagnosis or that anything's wrong with them. They may not have insight, or that insight may fluctuate. We can still build supports around that person. Someone calling up once a week to say hi and have a chat on the phone, nobody knows that that's related to dementia. Your mum doesn't know that, the friend may or may not even know, but just saying like this is something that she won't remember to call you. It would really help us if you can remember to call her once a week on a Wednesday. Or maybe the neighbor just pops by now and says, "Oh, hi, I'm just going to take your bins out." They're not saying, "Hi, I'm going to take your bins out because your daughter asked me to because you have dementia." Uh, it's about kind of that nuance and understanding the person and trying to build those supports in a subtle way, the way that we all need support as we age or as we have increasing needs. But I recognize that real challenge, that added layer of complexity when someone doesn't recognize that they might need help. I love the suggestions that are coming in there. There are a couple of other ones. Just having someone invite someone on a walk. Someone loves going for a walk daily, but just having someone else remind them and invite to go on a walk together. Um, Someone else dropping off food. I think people are very comfortable with dropping off food, one frozen meal a week. That might make a huge difference for somebody. Or to do a project together with a person, creating a photo album or packing up clothes for the thrift store, something that is a shared project that people can do together. As we start to look to when needs are increasing, it's a good idea to consider building up your formal support network. Thinking about where might you be able to bring in help from private agencies, the health authority, or community programs. You might not know any of these yet, so I'm just going to start to touch on these briefly. The more support you can have for things like housekeeping or yard work, the more time you will have to be able to enjoy one another, to focus on living well as well as you possibly can. Some communities have access to better at home services that are charged on a sliding scale, and they help people live at home as well as possible for as long as possible. You can get in touch with Better at Home by calling 211, like 911, but with a 2 in front, 211. It's also a good time to take note of an interesting but a sad statistic. The number one reason that people living with dementia move into long-term care unexpectedly or prematurely is that their care partner becomes ill or passes away, usually connected to stress because they tried to do everything all themselves, all on their own. I'm not saying this to be harsh or to scare anybody, but it is unfortunately an honest reality for many families. When it comes to dementia, doing it own is oft, doing it on your own is often not the best option. There is a link in the helpful resources document to a great handout we created called Accessing Services, Building Support Along the Dementia Journey. This little handout gives an overview of all the various different types of supports that are available, including formal supports, and on its back, it lists where you might find them. I'm not going to go into an in-depth discussion of the entire system today, as accessing services is a standalone session in itself. But you can already review a recording of that on our website in much more detail. I believe a link to that is in the helpful resources document. Or if you just want to talk this through and how it relates to your situation independently, you can call the First Link Dementia Helpline. This is a very blurry, very tiny document that talks about the different types of support networks. You don't have to try and squint at your screen to see this at the moment. There is a link to this in the helpful resources document. This kind of is a navigating the system document. It gives an overview of all the various different supports that are available and lists where you might find them. Uh, I am going to skip through and have a look at two of these types of resources. Um, on the left, we have home and community care through the Health Authority, and there's also Veterans Affairs there as well. So home and community care is called home and community care everywhere except Vancouver Island, who calls it community health services. But this is run through the Health Authority, and it provides access to some subsidized home support. Some of the services provided by the Health Authority include help administering medications, support with personal care like bathing or dressing, adult day programs and overnight respite stays, among other things. It's important to note that home and community care is not a crisis-based system. You can't call them up and say, I need help tomorrow. I've never been in touch with you before. So we always say it's best to not try and wait until you're in a desperate need of the services before you make the initial intake call. Make the call as soon as you think you might be getting close to needing some services, as it might take a while to get an assessment and start receiving support. A lot of the work that we do on the First Link Dementia Helpline and in our First Link support calls is talking through how and when you might connect with home and community care for your situation, for your family member, or for yourself. Once home and community care complete initial assessment, if you're eligible for support, you'll be connected with someone referred to as a case manager. And that person is your liaison to accessing all subsidized support services provided by the health authority. They will meet with you in your home and complete an assessment and together create a care plan with you. This case manager becomes someone it's really important to maintain a relationship with. Make sure you have their contact details because sometimes they might change as staff turnover happens in the health authority. I always recommend to people if you're interested in learning about a case manager or about home and community care to call us on the First Link Dementia Helpline because this is often for one family quite a long conversation to talk about what supports are available and how to make the best of your meeting with and connection with the case manager and with the health authority. I have on the, oh, sorry, I've scooted through there before I mentioned Veterans Affairs. If someone is a veteran or the spouse of a veteran, they may have access to support through Veterans Affairs that is very similar to the support offered by the Health Authority. Again, I recommend people call us on the First Link Dementia Helpline or get in touch with Veterans Affairs themselves because many people may not be aware that those supports are provided through Veterans Affairs. I mentioned at the beginning that I was going to touch on personal planning. While many of us are familiar with the concept of a will, which is considered estate planning, not everyone is familiar with the concept of personal planning, which is making arrangements for a time when a person needs help managing their affairs, including their health and personal care, their legal and financial affairs. Today, we're going to touch on just these topics briefly, just to alert you to the importance of early planning, but this is not a workshop on personal planning. We've got a whole nother one on that. Just covers there some of the areas where personal planning comes into play. Planning for later life, disability, and death is not the most uplifting topic, so many of us avoid the issue. But discussing these exact topics is particularly important when dementia is in the picture, since the window for having open, honest, and useful conversations may be more limited. The nature of brain changes due to dementia means that a person's legal competence, their ability to understand the impact of legal choices, will decline as dementia progresses. And legal competency is required for many legal documents, such as an enduring power of attorney. Having these discussions and getting these plans in place early makes things a lot easier for the person with dementia, since it allows them to stay in control of their future. It's also easier for the family since they will then know what a person with dementia really wants and will be in the legal position to be able to carry out those wishes. I encourage everyone to set it. Oh, my goodness, I'm so sorry. I scooted forward too early there. I wanted to share that I encourage everyone affected by dementia to set aside some time in the coming months to look through the information on our website on personal planning and start to familiarize yourself with things like an enduring power of attorney and a representation agreement. You will find, as always, the link in our handout, and it's called Personal Planning Along the Dementia Journey. And it's there in that helpful resources document that's been in the chat a couple of times there from Michael. Thank you. A caregiver reflected to us that personal planning is a process and it takes time. They said, you don't sit down and put this information together in an hour. You sit down and study this information and think about it. It takes a great deal of thought. This is something we all need, but we cannot do it in a minute. It might seem overwhelming and to hear me even talk about personal planning today, but taking it on piece by piece can help it be more manageable. And the need to break it down into pieces and spend time thinking about the individual elements is just another reason to start the process as early as possible. Throughout this session, we have discussed the importance of building a support network and maintaining a good quality of life. Another way that you can increase your support network while staying social and remaining active is by participating in community based programs, just like those hosted by us at the Alzheimer Society of B.C. There might be good days and bad days for both the person with dementia and their care partner, but a dementia diagnosis does not mean the end of a meaningful life. And there are many ways that you can get involved in your community and connect with others with lived experience. Let's take a little look at some of the programs and services available across the province. Here's our little look at our Walk for Alzheimer's, our RG Wealth Management Walk for Alzheimer's. Um, Part of what we do is aim towards a world without dementia. Until that day comes, we are committed to building a world where people living with dementia, their caregivers, and their families are included, acknowledged, and supported. A truly dementia friendly society. We're a nonprofit organization. The society is not part of the formal healthcare system, and we're independent of government ministries, although we do receive government and health authority funding for First Link programs. First Link Dementia Support connects you to a whole community of learning, services, and support throughout the dementia journey. Some of you may have been formally referred to First Link through your GP, specialist, or healthcare provider, or you might have called the First Link Dementia Helpline, or this might be the very first thing that you're connecting with us for. So, welcome. Either way, it's important to know a little bit about the various different programs and services that are available to you through the Alzheimer Society of BC. As we look through, um, we have a whole bunch of a number of support options for folks. We have regular phone calls, regular proactive support that we reach out to you on the phone and check in and see how you're going. We also have support groups for caregivers and people living with dementia. These groups are a safe space to share your questions, concerns, and experience. And if you like the feeling of interacting there on the chat and sharing some of how you've been feeling, that's just a little taster of what can happen in our support groups. Those groups meet online and in person across the province. We have a lot of different online groups as well, with a lot of different variety and availability and different types of groups. For example, a 2S LGBTQI plus group, a group for people who are spouses, a group for people who are caring for someone living in long-term care. There's a whole bunch of different groups, and I didn't mention all of them, so there's a lot more there that are available by calling us on the helpline. As we look at our other in-person supports, we have Minds in Motion, which is a fitness and social program designed for people living in the early stages of dementia and a care partner to do together. There's a run through various different rec centers across the province. We also offer a lot of education. Come see me live in person. The chance to see a little bit of what we do and dive deeper. Today's session is a webinar where you don't get the chance to go off mute and ask a lot of personal questions, whereas we do get that opportunity in some of our online education sessions and our in-person education as well. I have mentioned the Dementia Helpline so many times already today, but it really is a wonderful resource where you can call and say, "Hi, Amelia mentioned this in the webinar. I have more questions," or "I want to talk through more. I want to learn more about support groups," or "I want to sign up for support calls so that someone can call me every couple of months just to check in and see how I'm doing." As we come towards the end of the presentation today, we've talked about some difficult topics. And we know that being diagnosed with dementia can be scary and daunting. In the middle of this challenging diagnosis, it's really important we find some reasons to hope. Hope can be pretty elusive some days, it's true, but finding ways to be hopeful during the good days and bad days is so important to living well with dementia. I would love to end us with this quote from Marianne Radmacher: "Courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes courage is the quiet voice at the end of the day saying, 'I will try again tomorrow.'" This workshop is just a little step in the dementia journey, and I encourage all of you to continue your journey by learning more, by taking advantage of the programs and services the Alzheimer Society of BC has to offer. As we start to wrap up, I would love if you have any further questions to pop them in the chat. I'm going to ask Michael in a second what we've got there in the chat. I will say this straight away. I will not have a chance to get to every question there, especially if it's detailed. So if I don't get a chance to answer your question today, please don't feel disheartened. It is simply for lack of time, or if I know that the topic would be better served by calling us on the First Link Dementia Helpline. That number is 1-800-936-6033. And I'm sure Michael has popped that in the chat already. But if you do have any questions kind of related to the diagnosis or what we spoke about today, please feel free to pop it in the chat there. And Michael, is there anything that kind of stood out to you, one or two questions from the chat that I can have a look at?
Mm. Yeah. Had a few questions come in over the course of the meeting. My mother has been diagnosed for 12 plus years. Her wishes were to stay in her home until it is best to be in a care home. Are there any behaviors which will define this change? How can I help her?
Oh, that's a great question, and a plug straight away for considering the transition to long-term care. That is a recorded video that's up on our website in the recorded video section, and also an opportunity to talk through the First Link Dementia Helpline for your situation. But to answer the question kind of broadly, when we look at the reasons someone may need to move into long-term care, I think of my family members, and when we went through that first diagnosis process, we often have that feeling, oh, when they can't remember us, that's when they'll need to go into care. But some of you may be kind of nodding along there that that isn't the case for so many people. The reasons people move into care are varied. The reasons why one person may need to move into care while another can stay at home, even though they're being diagnosed at the same time, there's just so many different reasons. So, for example, some reasons that people often don't think of that someone might need to move into care earlier, or they might be at the stage to move into care, are incontinence. Incontinence can become really tricky to manage at home. The kind of cleaning and changing and lifting that can be required when incontinence is involved, and making sure that someone is clean and healthy, often requires kind of more medicalized care than people are able to offer at home. Another reason could be if someone is up a lot of the time throughout the night. For some people, even earlier on in this disease, they are up all the time at nighttime. Their days and nights are switched around. Therefore, the care partner isn't able to get any sleep. It's really unsafe for both of them because the person is trying to wander, leave the house, or the care partner is so burnt out because they're not able to get that essential sleep. Sometimes folks wait as long as possible until there's an incident. There's a fall, or there's a fire, or there's something that happens that makes everyone feel like, okay, now here's the big moment where someone needs to move into care. For many others, it's not this clear one big moment that someone needs to move into care, which is why it can feel so confronting and difficult when someone has moved into care, because you know what? Some days they're okay. Is it really the best environment for them? We can have a lot of emotions and difficulty processing this, because there may be many ways where they are still doing okay. But there are other ways that really mean that they need care in a more medicalized way, or in a more an environment that is really only offered in long-term care and not in the home. So there aren't really clear flags in the sand that say at this point someone must move into care. A lot of the time it's looking at the whole picture, and it's also not boxing ourselves into thinking if this happens, then they must move into care. Sometimes it's not that clear, and sometimes we just kind of have to make the best of a bad situation when it comes to moving into care. You can tell that's a topic I'm really passionate about, and so are my colleagues. If you call us on the helpline to talk that through further, or if that's bringing up some emotions or thoughts or questions for you, please do feel free to give us a call. Michael, is there any other quick questions there that might be relevant that I can go through here?
Sure. Here's one from Julia asked earlier. We are waiting to get my mom a diagnosis, but waiting list is 9 to 12 months. Do you have any
Mm.
better way to get it?
I have, I kind of have an answer that isn't about getting the diagnosis. Bear with me here. Uh, Sometimes you are waiting a really long time to get a diagnosis. And the way that many of us are used to interacting with the healthcare system is we wait for this and then we do the next thing. And then we do the next thing after that. But what if this thing, getting the diagnosis, takes so long? You are already doing what I'm going to suggest by being here on the webinar today, by engaging with the Alzheimer Society of B.C. Going maybe in your family saying, you know what, we're going to think of this as if she's already been diagnosed with dementia. We're going to keep pro proceeding with and trying to get that diagnosis happening. But in the meantime, we're going to do all the same things as if we'd already been told that. We are going to access some support for ourselves. We are going to make sure she's safe in the home. We are going to look at engaging some more social supports for my family member. So you can do all of that while you wait for the diagnosis to happen. I think the way that we are used to interacting with the healthcare system, the way many of us do, is that we kind of have to wait and then we can do all this stuff. I always tell people you can do that stuff first. The diagnosis can happen in its own time. Keep progressing with that. Keep pushing forward. Keep asking the doctor, is there anything that we can do to move this forward? Is there a specialist that you can refer us to? Can you give us a preliminary diagnosis? Asking all those questions is great, but do all the other stuff in the meantime. Don't let that stop you from accessing information, support, education about dementia. And if at the end of the day, that diagnosis doesn't happen, they say, well, it's not dementia, something else. Well, all you've done is help yourself build some more communication tools that are helpful for everybody. You've helped make sure your family member is well supported and is safe and is happy. All of that is important, regardless of whether someone has dementia or not. We are just about here at 3 p.m. I really appreciate people popping through lots of questions in the chat. And I can see there one popping through. I agree. While we waited, we also got legal affairs in order. Wonderful. Great example there. Michael, is there anything else that I missed that I can jump through just quickly here before we finish?
I did see a few other questions on the general theme of transition to long-term care. Someone
Mm,
asked, "My wife is in assisted living, long-term care. Did we move too soon? I keep wondering if I could have kept her at home with help."
yeah, I really recognize that that feeling is so similar for many people living, many caregivers. I don't know if I've spoken to anyone who doesn't kind of go through the should I, would I wish I kind of reflection piece, especially once someone's moved into care. And I wish I had a magic wand to say, yes, this is exactly what would have happened if you kept her at home and everything would have been fine or nothing would have been fine and she's in the best place. What I often suggest there for folks is just really reflecting on what I mentioned before, that there isn't one reason that people need to go into care. Um, and very, very rarely are people in care when they don't need it. I I very rarely come across situations where there isn't that level of care required in some way, some need in their life, showering or cleaning or toileting or help with food or wandering or incontinence. There's so many different reasons why someone might need to be in care. And the thing we never mention in that list is you as a caregiver as well, making sure that you are still alive and well at the end of this, because for many people they are not alive and well. They aren't able to pass pass through this disease with their own health and well-being. Just being here on today's webinar is kind of the start of the process for many people of really recognizing how to keep themselves well and healthy. But I think there's a lot of feelings of grief and guilt and many different emotions that come up when we reflect on thinking about moving to someone in long-term care or if they already have moved. And I would really suggest having someone to speak to about that. Call us on the First Link Dementia Helpline, connect with a registered clinical counselor or someone that you're able to really explore those feelings with, because you are not alone in those feelings. Thank you. Michael has popped the First Link Dementia Helpline number in the chat. I know I've promoted it so many times today, but it is a wonderful resource. You are very, very welcome to give us a call and talk about your situation independently. I really thank you all for your questions in the chat, your comments. It always makes this really engaging, even though it's just me talking at you. Thank you as well to Michael there, who's been sending through all the links and the information. We'll be back here next Wednesday at 2 p.m. I don't know what the webinar is. Michael, do you know what's happening next Wednesday?
On the plot, I could figure that out quickly.
I didn't give you any notice at all, so we don't know. But
It's lived experience, the power of creative self-expression.
oh my gosh, that's wonderful. That's going to be a really great webinar. I've heard about that one. It's people who are living with dementia or have experiences of being a caregiver, talking about creativity, talking about kind of finding that resilience through art and creativity throughout this journey. Really aligns nicely with some of that conversation that we had already. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today.